Hello students, welcome to the Indian Constitution class. Today I will be discussing about the most important topic in the Indian Constitution, that is Parliamentary System. So Indian Parliamentary System is based on the Westminster form of the government, that is nothing but the British Parliamentary System. So Indian Parliamentary System is also not vested only in the center, it's also vested in the states. So Article 163 and 164 speaks about the Indian Parliamentary System in the states, whereas Article 74 and 75 speaks about the parliamentary form of the government vested with the center. So here let's study more about the different types of the government in the world. So different forms of the government. In the world we have democratic form of the government, autocracy form of the government, oligarchy form of the government, and communist form of the government. So exactly, we know what exactly is democracy is. Democracy is for the people, by the people, and of the people. So countries like India, America, Russia, Japan, Canada, every other countries run through the democratic form of the government. So now, what is autocratic form of the government? Autocracy. Autocracy means the power is vested with one person. So he is the person who is responsible for framing the laws, and all the decisions taken by the government that will be based on his decision. So in this autocratic form of the government, it is divided into two types. One is monarchy and other one is dictatorship. Dictatorship. So monarchical form of the government, we know the king or queen, he or she is the head of the state, and all the decisions taken by the government or the country, that will be depending on his or her decision. So dictatorship, it's one single person's rule. So if you go with an example of monarchy, so it will be Bahrain, Cambodia, and others. So if you go with dictatorship, currently Korea, that is North Korea. North Korea is a dictatorial form of the government, and we can also witness the Nazi government, Germany. So that was also a dictatorial form of the government. So now coming to oligarchy. Oligarchical government we can see in 2 or 3 countries. Like for example, so oligarchy government, it's like the power or the policy making decisions or everything is vested with a group of people. So a small group of people or 3 or 4 members depending on them. So the power is vested with the group of people, then it can be called as oligarchical form of the government. For example, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the best example for oligarchy form of the government. So now, communist form of the government. So communist form of the government, we can see that the rules and everything, decision is based on the communist ideologies. So we can see that kind of a government in China, so Laos, Vietnam, Cuba, etc. So these are the present different kinds of the government existing in the world. So as we see, democracy. So a democracy example, India is an example with the democratical form of the government. Autocracy is again, it is being classified into 2, the monarchical and the dictatorship. And oligarchy means the power or the decision making or the rules, everything is vested with a small set of people or a group of people. And communist form of the government, communist ideologies. So China, Cuba, Laos, Vietnam, etc. So now let's speak about the democracy itself. So democracy itself is a different types. So now democracy is classified into 2. One is the direct democracy and another one indirect democracy. What is a direct democracy? So as we said, democracy is by the people, of the people, and for the people. So direct democracy is where the power and everything, the policies making, decision making, everything will be resting with people directly. Okay, so when the decision making or the policy making, everything, the power is vested with the people directly, then we call it as a direct form of a democracy. So when we call it as an indirect form of democracy, when the representation, when the representatives of the people is making the laws, rules, regulations and other things, then we call it as an indirect form of the government. So here people are controlling the government indirectly. Okay, so in the direct democracy, people are controlling the government directly. In indirect democracy, the people are controlling the government indirectly through the representatives. Okay, so now indirect democracy, again it's classified into two types. One is the parliamentary form of the government and the presidential system. So parliamentary system and presidential system. What is the parliamentary system? So parliamentary system is also called as Iowa Jennings says, it's a cabinet form of the government and it's also a Westminster form of the government. So here we have two types of the heads. One is the nominal executive and the real executives. In the parliamentary system, the executive is collectively responsible to the legislature, whereas in the presidential system, the executive is not collectively responsible to the legislature. So what happens in the parliamentary system? The head of the parliament, will be the head of the government. Okay, there will be a different head of the state and there will be different head of the parliament. Whereas in the presidential form of the government, there will be a head of the state. Okay, so the head of the state, he himself will be the head of the government. So this is all about the parliamentary system and the presidential system. So let's know more about the parliamentary and the presidential further. So now, parliamentary system. So why we need to know more about the parliamentary system? So as I said earlier, Indian government, the Indian constitution mentions about the parliamentary system. So as I said, Indian constitution mentions about the parliamentary system. We follow British parliamentary system. Okay. So now, what is exactly the parliamentary system? So the parliamentary system prevails both at the center as well as the state. So in the center, Article 74 and 75 speaks about the parliamentary system. In the state, Article 163 and 164 speaks about the parliamentary system at the state level. Okay, so parliamentary system of the government is one in which the executive is directly responsible for its policies and acts to the legislature. So Article 74 speaks about this. So Article 74 says that there will be a council of ministers. Okay, Article 74 says there will be a council of ministers where the president has to act according to the council of ministers. So this Article 74 is being emphasized and this is made true through the following amendments. The 42nd and 44th amendment made sure the president has to listen to the council of ministers, aid and advise to the council of ministers, and the decision of the council of ministers is binding on the presidential orders. So Article 75 says that the parliamentary system, that means the executive is responsible to the parliament, that is legislature. Article 75 makes sure that the executive is responsible to the legislature. The difference is mainly seen in separation of powers. Okay, so the difference between the parliament and the presidential. So parliamentary system is based on the principle of cooperation and co-responsibility, whereas the presidential form of the government is mainly based on separation of powers. Okay, so in parliamentary system, judiciary, legislature and executives, they are all working together. Okay, they are interlinked with one another. So for example, if the parliament goes wrong in certain decisions, certain policy makings, it might be like CAA or other institutions. So like then the judiciary pitches in through judicial activism or through PIL or whatever it is. So it makes sure that the executive is running in a proper way. And if judiciary is wrong, the legislature makes sure that the judiciary is running in a proper manner. Okay. However, in the presidential form of the government, judiciary is superior to other two and executive is independent of the legislature. So as I said, so here this is called as a separation of powers. Judiciary is superior than the executive and the executive is independent of the legislature. Whereas in the parliamentary system, all the three go in hand. Okay, so the parliamentary system is also called as the cabinet government. So it was said by Ivor Jennings. So Jennings says that the parliamentary system is also called as the cabinet government because the cabinet plays a major role in performing than the council of ministers. The cabinet plays a major role in taking the important decisions or the acts or the policies. So it's called as the responsible government because Article 75 makes sure that the executive is responsible to the legislature. And the Westminster model. Westminster is a place in Britain where the parliament is located. So that is called as the Westminster model. Example, Britain, Japan, Canada, India. So these are the countries goes hands in hand with the parliamentary form of the government. Britain, Japan, Canada and India. So the tenure of the parliamentary form of the government in India is for 5 years. Okay. So the parliamentary system is also called as the prime minister form of the government and PM is called as primus inter pares. It means equal, top among the equals. Okay. So he is the top among the equals, primus inter pares. So it's also called as the prime minister form of the government because in these days, so the prime minister makes a major role in leading the council of ministers of the cabinet. His decision is the major. So that's the reason the parliamentary form of the government is called as the prime minister form of the government. Okay. So now presidential form of the government. So in which places the presidential form of the government exists? So the tenure of the presidential form of the government is for 4 years. So except Russia, because in Russia recently they have made amendment, it has been made sure of 5 years, 6 years. So the presidential form of the government exists in USA, Russia, Brazil, Sri Lanka and other countries. So what exactly is presidential form of the government? As we said earlier, as we discussed about this earlier, the presidential form of the government is based mainly on the separation of powers. Okay, so judiciary is supreme over here. So judiciary is not dependent, it's supreme than the executive and the executive is separate of the legislature. So no retirement of judges, judgment is final. Okay, so now the legislature has Congress and Senate. Both have equal powers. Okay, legislature has both Congress and Senate, both have the equal powers. In our parliamentary form of the government, we have Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. So Lok Sabha has always an upper hand over Rajya Sabha except in few three certain situations. Okay, executive, modified spoil system. Okay, control of legislature over executive is only through budget and impeachment of president. So in our parliamentary system, the executive can control the legislature can control the executive in many ways. It might be removing of the powers of the president. So removing of the powers of the prime minister by through imposing the motions. It might be no confidence motion, cut motion, so other motions. So and they can just through privilege motions, all other things, all other instruments. So whereas in the presidential form of the government, the legislature has control over the executive only in the manner of budget or through impeachment of the president. Okay, so that's also very much a difficult one. Executive is not answerable to the legislature. Okay, whereas in parliamentary system, executive is answerable to the legislature. So president is not a part of the legislature. Whereas in parliamentary form of the government, president is part of the parliament. Okay, the parliament constitutes the president, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. Okay, so now the French system is the combination of president and parliamentary system. President is directly elected but responsible to the legislature. Okay, so we knew the presidential form of system and the parliamentary system. Whereas in France, okay, in France, there is a government which is the combination of both presidential and the parliamentary system. So this says that the president is directly elected by the people, whereas in India, in parliamentary system, the president is not directly elected by the people; he is indirectly elected by the people. But whereas in France, the president is the responsible over to the legislature. Okay, so this is all about the presidential system. So now, what are the features of the parliamentary system? So the main thing, there are, as I said earlier, the nominal and real executives. So what is the nominal executive? He is called as the de jure, and real executive, he is called as the de facto. Okay, the nominal executive becomes the de jure and the real executive becomes the de facto. So need of a nominal executive in a British system, in Indian system, we'll discuss about this later. So the de facto and de jure heads. Okay, de facto is the head of the government and de jure is the head of the state. So president, he is the head of the state while PM is the head of the government. So he becomes the de facto and he becomes de jure. Okay, so always there is a majority party rule. In the presidential, in the parliamentary form of the government, we can witness the majority party rule. Sometimes when there is no majority, even the coalition government, okay, coalition government also comes into the picture. So collective responsibility. Collective responsibilities, two meanings. So Article 75 speaks about the collective responsibility. So what is this collective responsibility? Collectively responsible to the parliament and should speak in the same voice. Same voice means it's not in the same tone. It means they should have the same ideology. Okay. So in the words of Ambedkar, they should swim and sink together. Ambedkar said in the parliamentary form of the government should swim and sink together. Okay, double membership, that is the minister is a member of both executive and the legislature. So double membership says that the minister is always, he is a member of an executive as well as he is a member of the legislature. So he can be an MP, can become he can sit in the, he is an MP of the house and as well as the minister of the government. Okay, the leadership of the PM, so oath of secrecy. So a member, if he has become a minister, he has to take two oaths. One is the oath of the house as becoming an MP or an MLA, or and the oath of secrecy. By being the minister, he has to take an oath of secrecy. So this is the features of parliamentary system. So now merits of the parliamentary system. So what are the merits of the parliamentary? There is always a harmony between the legislature and the executives. Usually what I said, there is a majority party rule. So there will be a one party rule. For example, there will be if in a party, so all everyone's ideologies will be the same. A single party will be ruling. So obviously there will be the leader, the larger house. So the larger party will frame the government. Obviously there will be a harmony between the legislature and as well as the executive. So responsible government. So as I said, there will be a responsible government because they have got the majority party, and because authorities are dispersed, it prevents authoritarian or dictatorial tendencies. So wider representation. So representations can also be not only in Karnataka, or representations can be from even with the nooks and corners of northeast India, the north of Jammu and Kashmir, the south of Tamil Nadu. Even their representations, the ministers, everyone equally get the representations. So the members can also from there is no need of the members. The prime minister has only has to be from Rajya Sabha. The prime ministers need not be only from the Lok Sabha. Both the members from the Rajya Sabha as well as the members from Lok Sabha can become the prime ministers. For example, in the year 1966, Indira Gandhi became the prime minister when she was a member of Rajya Sabha. And in the year 1996, Deve Gowda became the prime minister and when he was a Rajya Sabha member. And again in the year 2004 and in the year 2009, so Manmohan Singh became the prime minister. He was also a member of Rajya Sabha. So now historical factors continue to the British system. So historical factors, we were more comfortable with the British system, British form of the government rather than the presidential form of the government. That's the reason we chose the parliamentary system than over the presidential form of the government. So now demerits of the parliamentary system. Always whenever there is a merit, there will be always the demerits. So now let's see what are the demerits of the parliamentary system. Unstable government. You can witness unstable government because whenever there is a coalition government, sometimes every coalition government will not be successful. For example, in the year 1996, 1997, 1998, we had seen the number of fluctuations in the year 1992. Okay, so we can find the governments falling because of the coalition politics. There will be no same ideologies Okay, that's the reason unstable government will also witness in the parliamentary system unless you get the full majority or through horse trading or whatever it is. You can demerits. Unstable government is also a demerit of you can not find a stable government. Okay, exceptions, there are a number of exceptions only unless you have a strong the prime minister rule or you can get complete majority. Okay, no continuity of policies. Example, since the government might change because different party rules. Since we have a major party, double party rules. So, for example, in this rule we have a BJP government. In the next rule, if it's something else government, other government comes. So it does not mean that the same policies has to be continued. So, for example, in the year 2003 and 2004, there was a policy called POTA or UAPA, where POTA. So, Prevention of Terrorism Act, when the BJP government, when it was an India government, when the UPA government came in the year 2004, this was repealed. Okay, so there might be tendencies like the present government may not accept the policies of the previous government. So that's the reason no continuity of the policies, chances may be less. So dictatorship of the government, example Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi in the previous governments, they can be the dictatorship in the cabinet. Again is the principle of separation of power. Okay, again is the principle of the separation of power. The cabinet is the hyphen that joins the buckle that binds the executive and the legislature departments together. Okay, so the cabinet is a buckle. It's like it's a joint between the executive and as well as the legislature. So executive, the council of ministers, and the legislature, the parliament, the cabinet decides what are the government, what are the policies that we need to continue. So again is the principle of separation of powers. There is no separation of powers here. So no one is interdependent, no one is independent, but all the three powers, for example, judiciary, executive, and legislature, they are all interdependent. Okay, so for example, executive and legislature both are the same. So the cabinet is the buckle between them. So it's the joining point. So the government by amateurs, ministers are not experts. In presidential form of the government, so there is always the government is run by the experts. Okay, the president can appoint the experts. What the president appoints need not to be the ministers or representatives. He always elects the experts. Whereas the same here, the government is run by the amateurs. For example, if a person he is a favor to I'm taking an example, if he is very much favor or very close to the prime minister or whatever it is, the leader of the party or anyone, so he can be chosen as the minister. He may not be a master's in, for example, he becomes a minister for home affairs or external affairs. He may not be an IFS officer. He don't have any ideology about the external things, but he tends to become the external affairs ministers. Okay, so this again is called as an amateur government, but he is not an expert in external affairs related to the issues related to the external things. Okay, so these are the demerits. Few points are the demerits of the parliamentary systems. So again, these are the reasons why we chose the parliamentary system over the presidential form of the government. So one thing is the familiarity with the system, because for more than 100 years we were with the British Parliament. So under the British control, we were very much with the British parliamentary system. So many of the leaders felt that rather than scratching hands with the unknown government, we shall go with the parliamentary form of the government. So preference to responsibility over stability. So than the stability, we need the responsibility. We need to take the responsibility. The parliamentary system takes the responsibility, but there may need not be a stable government. Always exceptions cases are there. But in the presidential form of the government, there can be a stability, but there is no responsibility. So we chose responsibility over the stability. And then to avoid the conflicts between the legislature and executive, until the legislature and the executive goes in harmony, goes in hands in hand, there will be always the conflict. In order to avoid that conflict, so we chose the parliamentary system than the presidential form of the government. So nature of Indian society. So because the nature of Indian society makes sure what if all the PM were from the Hindi heartland. So as I said, the representations are from all the nooks and corners of India. Even a person from South India has become the Prime Minister. Even the person from North India has become a Prime Minister. Even for the person from Western India has also become the Prime Minister. So Swaran Singh Committee in 1975 opined to retain the parliamentary system. So in 1947 and 1950 when we adopted the parliamentary form of the government, there was a question whether to continue this or not. So in the year 1974 we appointed the Swaran Singh Committee 1974 and 75 and we said that we thought whether we could continue with the parliamentary form of the government or we could go with the presidential form of the government. The Swaran Singh Committee recommended the parliamentary form of the government is doing very good and we shall continue with the parliamentary form of the government. So this is all about the parliamentary system. This is just the glimpse of the parliamentary system. So let's know more about the parliamentary system in the further classes. Thank you for listening to the class and hope we'll join soon.